Hands off, Sully. The conservators are on the way. We don't want to destroy the evidence. Great timing. We need you to conserve what's left of the evidence and help identify the parts.
Any suspects?
Yeah. The agents of destruction. I just can't nail down which one.
These are in pretty bad shape. We're gonna need some time.
Sure.
These fibers have been extremely distressed.
Handling?
Fading. And look here.
All those holes. It's bugs.
Maybe. But look here. Good as new. The damage is localized. If there was an infestation of insects big enough to do that, why didn't they spread out? To top off this little mystery, there's evidence of uniform shrinkage along the edges, here and here.
Pretty weird, huh?
It's not pretty, but definitely weird. Conservator Smith here.
Me too. I'm here, Conservator Jones.
What you are about to witness is fact.
This program is all about conservation.
I was getting to that. This program is about conservation.
Most people, when they think about conservation, think of conserving our natural resources like water or oil reserves. But today we're talking about something just as important, the conservation of cultural resources, works of art and historical artifacts, objects that tell us stories about our ancestors. A conservator is someone who cares for art and artifacts from the past.
We're concerned with the structural stability of an object.
Stabilization is the foundation of our treatment to make sure that everything is going to stay where it needs to stay.
Stabilizing is trying to prevent further damage.
From a non-invasive standpoint of view.
And we're interested in conserving what remains of the object, conserving it in the condition usually in which we got it.
Colonial Williamsburg has conservation laboratories that specialize in different kinds of materials or different kinds of artifacts.
If it's old and important and made of some kind of material, then they're interested.
That's what I said.
Conservators are all about stabilizing stuff.
You mean artifacts and objects?
That's what I said.
The conservator's job is to keep artifacts and objects
Stuff.
from deteriorating. But how do they do that?
The first steps are to understand the object as well as possible, where it came from, who made it, why they made it, how it was first used, and then to understand its materials.
Most objects and artifacts from the past have some kind of damage to them, just from being around for a long time or being in the wrong place for a long time.
Where they fall prey to
the agents of destruction.
Yeah. And each agent of destruction leaves behind a telltale sign that lets the conservators know what caused the damage.
Like water damages paper, whether it's a spill or relative humidity. Go ahead and Google relative humidity to see what I'm talking about. Water can do some serious damage. The ink could smear, the paper could buckle, and a tide line, just like the line the tide makes in the sand at the beach, can destroy a wonderful old letter.
That's right, Jones. Or light streaming through a window can cause wood to fade, becoming lighter over time. And sometimes the only way you can tell what the original wood looked like is to compare it to a piece of wood that was protected. It can be a dramatic difference.
Pests and bugs, aka Smith's best friends, can destroy the strength of a piece of furniture. For example, woodworms are very tiny and bore their way into the wood and eat until there is almost nothing left. From the outside, you can't even tell that it's happening until the piece collapses from having too much weight put on it. Like this chair leg. All those little tiny holes are from woodworms flying out. after having a mahogany buffet. Those holes are called flight holes.
Chemical action can take many forms, but the one we all know is the rusting of iron. It can build up so thick that archaeologists and conservators can't even tell what the artifact below the rust is.
Sometimes people are the agents of destruction. Take a family heirloom that's been passed down from generation to generation. If it's a metal and you want to put it on your table, you polish it. But polishing and polishing over generations can wear away decorative detail.
Then there's inherent vice, my personal favorite.
I like it too.
Inherent vice is when an object is made of two materials that don't get along very well. Brass tacks on a leather chair looks expensive, but the leather is made from an animal hide that has fatty acids in it. Well, those fatty acids touching the brass tacks produce this green corrosion that doesn't look so good, but it also makes pits in the brass and weakens it.
Of course, not all agents of destruction leave a mark on every artifact. The lyre guitar shows the effects of water, not necessarily liquid water, but the kind of moisture that's in the atmosphere.
That's relative humidity. The moisture in the air gets into the joints and dissolves the glue, causing the wood pieces to separate.
And see here, chemical action can be seen in the tuning pins. They all have corrosion on them, but you'll notice that most of them have a green corrosion.
Like the brass tacks in the leather. That means the tuning pins were made of brass or copper.
There's one pin that has orange corrosion, which is a sign it is made of iron.
That also means that pin has been replaced.
Excellent observation, Jones.
The wooden base has flight holes from woodworm. These are little insects that bore into the wood, and you can see the little holes left when they leave the wood.
And it looks as if light did a bit of damage. The discoloration of some of the wood and fading of the finish is there, but it's slight.
And then there's damage that really isn't considered damage because it's part of the story of its past.
I don't get that.
There are gouges in the soundboard where, as it was played as a musical instrument, fingernails gouged into the soundboard. It's something that happens just from use. We actually appreciate those signs of age because they show us that this was not just a decorative object. This was an actual musical instrument. It was appreciated not just for the way it looked, but for the music it made.
Almost all of our objects have history in the life of the object itself, not just in the fact that the object exists. What the object has gone through in its life is oftentimes quite interesting, especially if it's related to an historic figure.
What we present is a picture of the material history of the object, what changes it's undergone, what condition it's in, how it's been used, and how that affects its condition.
Conservators discover, investigate, and then intervene to stop objects from getting into worse condition.
They are researchers, scientists, and skilled craftspeople.
That's what I said.
So, what have you got?
It's definitely the agents of destruction, boss. But the MO is off.
It's not their usual method of operation, boss.
That's what I said.
So?
It appears to be conspiracy. A number of agents working together.
Burn marks.
Yeah,
Grass stains?
believe so.
Bring in the agents of destruction for questioning.
Which ones, boss?
All of them. This is boss. Get me the mayor.
Face front.
Where's temperature and inherent vice?
They couldn't be found. Son, step forward. Not you, Bug. Son, face left. No, your other left. In addition to tracking down agents of destruction, conservators thoroughly investigate every artifact that comes into their lab.
This inspection can often reveal very interesting stories.
The spice cabinet is a wonderful object that represents the transmission of styles from the Delaware Valley into Virginia and into the back country. It's called a spice cabinet, but it's actually more accurately described as a valuables cabinet because spices were just one of the things that were very costly in the time.
The initials MW represent Mary Warford, who lived in the western part of Virginia in 1791.
We also found an inscription of John written on the side of one of the drawers in red chalk, which is a typical 18th century material for inscriptions of that type.
It was common for craftsmen to sign their work, so one might assume that John is the maker.
Mary Warford's husband's name was John. The plot thickens.
There's also the space in what is the cornice of the piece that would be available to some additional storage area.
So, if there is a secret compartment, how do you get to it?
The plot thickens again.
They discovered actually a secret drawer in the back of the spice chest, and in the drawer were several packets of papers that turned out to be related to the family that owned the spice chest. The paper over the past 200 years in that secret drawer became somewhat brittle from various agents of destruction.
It turns out that the packets of paper were covered in black soot. The conservators believe that John was a blacksmith.
And there's no one sturdier in the 18th century than a blacksmith.
First, the packets had to be dry cleaned.
Not like a prom dress, but by taking a piece of grated eraser and rubbing it across the surface of the paper. The soot is picked up by these little crumbs of eraser.
Ms. Young puts the cleaned, folded documents into a humidification chamber.
A hose comes from an ultrasonic humidifier into the dome. The ultrasound breaks up water into teeny tiny droplets, and the moisture flows through the hose and into the chamber.
The documents in there are essentially sitting in a cloud of moisture. And over a period of time, those little droplets of water will sink in the paper fibers. The humidity in the chamber will soften and relax the folds in the paper and the paper itself, so we can open the folded paper without risk of cracking or fracturing the paper. So it gives us a glimpse into the early 19th century of perhaps an extraordinary family, perhaps just a common family, but it's something that usually doesn't survive, at least the specific details of how a family conducted its business and its personal affairs.
Columbia is a 19th century patriotic sculpture made out of wood, one big piece of eastern white pine. It's about 7 feet tall. It was made in probably the last quarter of the 19th century.
Columbia, Goddess of Liberty, American icon.
This Columbia was probably made for a public building as an architectural decoration.
It's interesting from a lot of different points of view. One is that it shows so many different hands in it. That is, there's the original maker, there's the original decoration of it, and then there's the decoration that has since evolved.
Why are Columbia's clothes maroon, yellow, and green? If you were the Goddess of Liberty, wouldn't you be painted red, white, and blue?
Excellent deduction, Jones.
We've taken paint samples at different spots on the sculpture, looked at those, we call them cross-sections, look at those little samples which are smaller than the head of a pin, much smaller than the head of a pin, in fact. Looked at those cross-sections under a microscope, and you can see the entire paint history of the object. Taking, for example, the yellow drape that she's wearing, when we look closely at that, we looked at our cross-sections, our paint cross-sections, and realized that immediately beneath that yellow there's a layer of dirt, and beneath that there's a layer of white paint.
So why did the last owners paint her white drape yellow?
Simple deduction, Jones. Varnish always turns a brownish yellow with age. If you have something white, like the drape of Columbia, with a brownish yellow varnish on top, it looks yellow.
So if you never knew that it was originally white, you'd freshen up old Columbia's drape with yellow paint.
Exactly. What about red covered in brownish yellow varnish?
A deeper red, maroon, and blue with yellow is green.
Precisely.
What a perfectly logical wrong impression.
There's actually a rumor that, which I haven't been able to substantiate, that Columbia spent part of her life in a frat house, a fraternity house.
Water is an agent of destruction, but it's also an agent of preservation.
Think of the water being one with the object.
Yes, O Master Obi-Wan.
These old shoes were found in the shallow water at the bottom of an old well.
Because the shoes were found in water, they need to be kept in water until they can be freeze-dried by the conservator.
Yes, freeze-dried, like astronauts' food. It is the best way to dry the leather out without destroying the shoes. This pistol was found in a well on Jamestown Island, site of the first permanent English settlement in America.
The pistol is very well preserved. And in addition, when we x-rayed it, one of the things that we could see was that the pistol was loaded.
But how do you get rid of all that rust?
2 words, Jones. Air abrasion.
That is like a mini sandblaster. We're using very small powder at a high pressure to help us remove dirt and corrosion from the surface of iron artifacts.
Conservators are always searching for the best ways to uncover the hidden stories of objects without causing additional harm along the way.
Much of their job is to discover and investigate.
But that's not the end of it.
I'm finding this hard to take in, Smith. You're telling me the agents of destruction didn't do this?
That's what I'm telling you, boss.
These are the jeans from the hotel. Look at this evidence. There is real damage here. Agent of destruction damage. The mayor is on my back. This city won't sleep until we find the culprit.
It's a copycat crime, boss. The evidence of wear, the fading, the holes, all manufactured to look like the work of the agents of destruction.
Smith is right, boss.
Of course I'm right.
Go on, Joan.
It's not just a copycat crime. It's a fashion crime. It's all here in the tween times. People specialize in making brand new clothes to look ready for the trash heap.
So you're telling me that relative humidity and sunlight and handling, none of them had anything to do with this destruction?
Not a thing.
Can I keep these?
Minimal intervention is a term referring to doing as little work as possible on an object, but making sure that that object remains stable.
You are preserving the object. No more nails into the frame.
I'm in the business of stopping paper from being brittle.
Past restorers of paintings were often artists that did a lot of heavy overpainting, which we do not do now.
So we're going back to the original, leave it, and where the worst worn down, we're going to fill it with the same way like was done in the 18th century.
So that the design then becomes whole again, and we understand the object holistically.
To make the object look better, but with the least loss or erosion of that evidence on the surfaces.
We look at everything from a conservation standpoint of view. We look at things that not only to preserve the object, also from a non-invasive standpoint of view. The frame comes into the foundations. I'm so fragile they just cannot withstand another nail on upholstery.
Upholstery on chairs in the 18th century was common for those who could afford it.
But upholstery wears out.
Or goes out of fashion, like jeans.
So if you like the chair, you keep the wooden frame and reupholster the chair. Good as new.
Good as new.
That's what I said. Every time a chair gets reupholstered, more nail holes are hammered into the frame.
This makes it weak, fragile.
So Mr. Graves invented a way to upholster the chair
to make it look like it did in the 18th century
without putting more holes in it.
We give you Mr. Graves' non-invasive copper slipcover. Ta-da!
I think for scholars to come in, they'll be able to take this frame and examine it and then tell its history on how it was used, what it was used for, and where it was used. And that's what makes it so exciting for me. And I hope that makes it exciting for the next individuals to come in to look at these objects.
We have a collection that spans multiple hundred years, and many of these come to us in an untouched state, which is a fascinating and wonderful thing. And it comes with great responsibility to do as little as possible to these things.
Smith, do you know how painting conservators spend most of their time?
Cleaning services of paintings.
Cleaning paintings!
That's what I said.
These old paintings were hung in houses, heated with fireplaces and lit by candles, producing airborne grime and soot.
Using modern chemistry to tailor cleaning solutions to each situation,
With the swish of low-tech cotton swabs,
and a gentle hand of a conservator,
a valuable painting is cleaned.
I believe we left out patience.
Lots of patience. Yes, I know. You said that.
The Carolina room is a very rare painted interior that consists of wooden panels that have been painted in their entirety.
This is a whole room made of southern yellow pine that was painted in the 19th century.
To look like a room that wasn't made of pine.
The fireplace mantle is made of wood, but is painted to look like stone.
The top of the walls are painted to look like wallpaper border.
And so it's a celebration of the imagination and human creativity. So it's a very important time capsule. We know exactly who made it, exactly when, and we know that these materials were available and it existed in this state, in this home. So it's a very rich, historic entity.
Even though conservators have removed the grime and repaired what was necessary, an artifact or object can still fall prey to the agents of destruction.
Rust never sleeps. Bugs are always hungry. Water falls.
Even so, objects and artifacts often go on display for the public to enjoy.
And being out in public puts them in danger.
That's where preventive conservation takes over.
I was drawn to preventive conservation because it's a process in which I can preserve thousands of objects at a time, so fewer and fewer objects require treatment or have to go into the labs for treatment because it's preventing the damage from happening in the first place.
Colonial Williamsburg puts its objects and artifacts on display in buildings or enclosed museums.
We have a lot more control in the museum buildings because they're new buildings and they're built to house collections. We have very, very sophisticated heating and air conditioning and humidity control. It's much, much more sophisticated than someone's home.
Still, the preventive conservator has to be on guard.
We look at dust and particulate levels and dust in the atmosphere and also debris and things brought in on people's shoes because we have such high visitation here that there are all kinds of things that can be brought into the buildings that may damage collections.
So, you may think it would be best just to keep them in a locked aluminum vault in a nice cool limestone cave in Pennsylvania far away from harm.
I think it's very important for these collections to be in museums where everyone can access them as opposed to in private collections, and that's why we're so careful about what we collect so that we can put together a really instructive body of stuff. And there are things about the collections that we have that people don't know yet. And so future scientists and better technology, better information, uncovering a new diary, things like that will allow people to find out more about the stuff that we are keeping safe for everyone else.
See, it's stuff. Conservators are all about stuff.
That's what I said.